We know what we are. We know what we are. Calendar year Champions League qualifiers. We know what we are. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot, the Blackman, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. That's what we are. We are calendar year Champions League qualifiers. In fact, 1 point off Liverpool for the calendar year table. And I think this is progress because back when we were, sort of good and sort of relevant under Arsene Wenger, we loved to talk about what we were doing for the calendar year, and we're back to doing it. So I think that's progress. The only downside is that, I think maybe not everybody, but most people had now started to warm to Mikel Arteta, and now he's out. He's gone. New manager, just for the game, hopefully. And we do wish Mikel Arteta well. Obviously, COVID, no laughing matter. So we certainly hope that he is doing well, gets through it. It seems like he's going to be okay. And, if there's a game for him to miss, maybe not having to be too close to the Manchester City game is not the worst thing. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the lead up to the Manchester City game, what we might expect from that, a little bit on the transfer window, and a little bit of calendar year wrap up. And here to do that with me is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Pause My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo!
And Clive. You can find him on Twitter at Clive PFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Tim is currently at a churrascaria in Brazil having all the meat. They have the meats, and he is having all of them. So that is the plan for him, and we certainly wish him well in his recovery from all the meats.
I hear, surprisingly, he bumped into Alexander Lacazette at the Churrasco.
Was he sweating?
Just starting to.
We know Clive is a fan of Lacazette and his sweats post-meat consumption, as they have sometimes been called. But enough of that silliness. Clive, we play Manchester City, but we do not play them until the new year. So we are officially calendar year Champions League qualifiers. How does it feel? Have you celebrated yet?
Well, there's a lot of celebration online, isn't there, about people that have been supportive versus people not so supportive. And see, I told you, we're doing good. You need to stay with it, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little bit like that. But hey, look, there's a massive determination to be right, isn't there, as football fans? When did that start?
I think you can I got to level with you. I think anyone who's listening to me would know that I am not a part of that culture and that I have actually had a massive determination to be wrong. So I like to consider myself countercultural. No, just real quick. I know this is sort of a side point, and I don't want to get stuck into it, but I do think that in general, sometimes when the prevailing online sentiment is frustration and anger, and you're not feeling that, you're feeling patient or more optimistic, you can catch hell for it. Sometimes when the prevailing sentiment is ebullience and celebration and you're feeling that there are concerns, you can catch hell for it. And I can think of moments over the last several years where this has happened, whether it was the Emery unbeaten run or certain transfer signings or frustrations with Arteta in both directions. And what I think it's a reminder of is that the best thing we can do is have really good discussions and debates with people that want to debate in good faith on the merits and not be worried about whether we were right on this issue or wrong on that issue. Just to update our opinions and our discussions the best we can based on the information we have available and try to say what we honestly feel. And if people can say, hey, I got a counterpoint to how you honestly feel and here's what it is, take it on board. Doesn't mean you have to be right or wrong, because I think what we've found is that let's say you are quote unquote right when the prevailing online sentiment is going the other way. You're going to catch a lot of hell. You know what you're not going to get? You're not going to get a lot of people coming back later being like, hey, I was kind of a jerk, but boy, were you right. Because that's not how the internet works. So the best thing you can have is just good, rewarding debates. And I know that that's sort of a little kumbaya bullshit. So
nice,
probably not worth a lot, but that's what we try to do here anyway. Yeah.
We did. And you know what? My number one thing is just open your mind up to different thought processes. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you have to agree. But by adding that to your own thought process, you become a better thinker about the game. And that's it. That's how I do it, mate. And if it works for me, I like to learn. I've learned loads from you, Elliot. Loads. And you, Paul. Absolutely loads. Just the way you think.
Hysteria. And talk faster. Yeah.
And the priorities by which you look at the game. We all have different priorities, don't we? We have different things and emphases. And that's fine. Man, that's absolutely fine. If you go a bit crazy, then we're all here to talk it through, right? Simple.
Sure. And we all have areas where we're stronger and weaker individually. Like Clive, obviously you're especially strong on the tactics side of things, right? Paul is especially strong on the analogies. And like
Eskimos, I know 100 words for your nasty parts.
That's really, really important. I feel that this may have already digressed at some level, especially considering we were going to have just a punchy 1 hour podcast here, and 5 minutes in, all we have discussed is nothing. But now that we've patted ourselves on the back for having great discussions and debates, and because you are a listener here, you obviously fall into that group and you deserve to pat yourself on the back. So let's get into, and look, as far as the calendar year stuff, I don't want to dismiss that the signs are good. Absolutely do not want to dismiss the signs are good, because what you're always looking for is the trajectory. And, I think, Clive, when we look at Unai Emery for a minute, Unai Emery started on that long unbeaten run. The metrics did raise some red flags. The football maybe wasn't eye-catching, but it was an unbeaten run. He had us within touching distance of top 4 and collapsed spectacularly, and then started the next season on a poor run. If he had done that in reverse, he would certainly not have been sacked, and we would have been saying, wow, he's really finally getting it working. The point is trajectory, and what I think is exciting about Arteta is whatever reservations I had or concerns I had, and they existed, I can look and say, I see an upward trajectory. I see an implementation of a process. I see an addition of the kinds of players and talent that can execute on that, and it's bearing fruit. So we still, we don't want to be conclusive, but we want to be encouraged by the direction of travel. And I think that's something that we can probably rally around. Fair enough?
Absolutely. I think learning about Emery has allowed me to learn about Arteta, if I'm honest, because I can remember that run, and I can remember you saying, there's some worrying things here, Clive. Mate, I was gone. I was in Kool-Aid land. I was gone. Do you know what I mean? I was thinking, this is great. Something different to Wenger, somebody really trying to coach them, and I'm thinking, really being demonstrative on the sideline. I thought, yeah, this is really, really good. And then it slowly started. Then what changed for me was the dressing room relationships, and that's what changed. It became a battle of human beings, and he didn't quite have the strength of character and maybe the emotional investment to stay with it. Right? You know what? I take my 6 mil and I'll do one into the sunlight, and that's what he did. Right. So when Arteta came along, I was a little bit more holistic in my thinking about where he's going, and I think again he picked up a bag of standards, if I'm honest with you. And when he first came and people were looking to get into him, when he first hit his dips, I was quite strident. It was player related rather than coach related, and took a lot of pressure for that because people weren't convinced by the coach, which is their right, a first time job, etc. But now we can see the players, and now we can see the coach. And I think if any of us have got something to learn, all of us really, is what makes a player and what type of players work in the modern game. And I think we're much closer to that than where we were a year and a half ago. And it's been an expensive exercise, but I think we can all see there's a upward trajectory, to steal your words, Elliot.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's probably enough on the macro for right now, if that's okay, Paul. I mean, certainly you can weigh in on that, but I do want to steer it towards the City. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's not a big point or a big discussion thing, but when I did a little calc on from December 26th last year, when our little Lord and Savior was delivered to us, Emile Smith-Rowe, and we changed how we played, and we went hopefully on this upward trajectory. Our points per game for the last 24 games of last season is basically 2 points per game, which is a great clip to run at for where we want to be. And this season, for the 19 games, it's 1.9. So just a smidgen off there. If we hadn't, well, I guess we were always likely to lose the City and the Liverpool games. If we'd won, say, the Brentford game and been a little quicker out of the blocks, maybe picked up a 3-pointer instead of a 1-pointer along the way, we'd be right there at that, just around the 2 points per game mark, which is, I mean, it's not a magic number, but that's a number that gets you in the top 4 or top 3 frame most years. So that's a 76-pointer as a season. So that's what we've run basically since Smith-Rowe showed up, just shy of the 2 points mark. And if we can improve slightly and run at that 2-pointer mark for the rest of the season, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah. All right. So then I agree with that. Let's start to turn our attention to the fact that Arteta is out, though it feels harsh considering the trajectory we've been on to make the change now. I'm kidding, of course, but no. What's your take on how this impacts the upcoming game. I mean, we'll get into the upcoming game from a tactical standpoint and player and all that, but just in terms of him not being on the touchline, Albert, how do we say this? Stuyvenberg? How are you saying
Any
it?
way we like. I'm going with Stuyvesant. That's wrong, but I like
Stuyvenberg, I think it is.
Stuyvenberg. Okay. Come on, guys. Look. Here's the point. He's going to have AirPods. They're calling him AirPod Albert on Twitter. It's trending. What do we think of this?
It's probably easier than Albert Stuyvenberg.
Yeah, Stuyvenberg. Can you just please, please? Clive, Paul, any thoughts? No, nothing.
Sorry. On your question.
Yeah. What does this impact? Yeah.
I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. It could hurt a teeny bit, could help a teeny bit. Like, it'll give him you hear managers say that when they've been, they're not allowed to watch the game from the touchline, they have to watch from the stands. They see the game in a different way. So he may just see the game in a different way. He won't have the best view of the pitch because he's probably not in the stadium because like COVID and isolation and stuff. So that won't help. But maybe perspective-wise, it'll be a little bit of a different feel for him. Pluses and minuses, I don't think it matters. I really don't. And I'm not convinced by the Galaxy brain narrative, but that's a whole bigger discussion. I think we just don't like losing as fans. And when he does something a bit different because we're playing City, or it used to be he gets Galaxy brained against David Moyes, and then we started doing well against him and beating him. So now he's not Galaxy braining David Moyes. He's only Galaxy braining Pep Guardiola. And on the one hand, we want him to go into these games just playing our football the best way we can. And on the other hand, managers are going to make tweaks. They're not just, they're going to look at the opposition and see, can I stop that guy hurting me? Because if I can stop that guy hurting me, we might have a chance. So you're not going to be as smart and as clever as these guys with the tools at your disposal and not make a choice or two. But hey, if we want to call it Galaxy Brain, okay.
Yeah. And by the way, I think the Galaxy Brain thing is overdone, but I do think that there are times when managers opt to make changes based on the opposition they're facing that look like maybe they're overthought in the context of what could have been done by going with what has been successful in the past. But like, that's sort of like saying, hey, manager, don't manage. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I've liked you for all the stuff you do, but I just don't want you to do it in this game. Like, it's sort of a weird... I want you
to set up the same way you did against Norwich, because that worked great.
Yeah, and the problem, right, is that you make those tweaks and they work and they're genius. You make the tweaks, they don't work, and it's Galaxy Brain. It's sort of a post hoc way of saying, I think you managed wrong. Right,
and
Clive?
The problem is almost anything you do against City, you're probably going to look a bit stupid.
Exactly. It's what is it? I'm going to sound like such a nerd here, and I wasn't a big Star Trek guy, but I think there was a thing in Star Trek called like the Kobayashi Maru, and it was a test that of like the pilots of these starships, but it was designed so that there was actually no way to pass it. Every decision led to failure and death, and the point of it was to like just measure how you cope in adversity. And the measure of it wasn't about like whether you succeeded or not, because it was designed to not be succeeded. And then like the William Shatner character like hacked the computer, cheated, and created a way that he could win. And then they're like, well, that's cheating. And he's like, but I found a way to beat it. But this is all very relevant. But the point is like facing City can be the managerial Kobayashi Maru in the sense of like, it's an interesting measure of seeing what you try to come up with, but more often than not, it's not going to work anyway, Clive.
Yeah. So if you're not thinking about how you can improve things, then you're not really a coach, right? So I think this is something that you think about all the time, you know. So it's something that I think about, and I've got no responsibility, right? So I think so when you make a good decision, then it's not overthinking; it's just a good decision. When you lose the game, then it's overthinking. So I do think there are games when you need to be a little bit more risk averse, particularly European semi-finals, maybe, you know, and think about you may not have another chance. But in the 38-game league season, if you feel you've seen something and you want to make a change for it, And absolutely, you go with it, right? You absolutely do. Now, we're picking on the trends at Man City, for example, and and that theory is a valid one. I don't mind, but it's not something that I hold my hat on to, really. I agree with Paul there a little bit. As for Arteta, his style of coaching is very, very hands-on. I think he will be missed. He is all about presence. Just look at him, look into his face. Do you think that he holds that dressing room? There's no one else going to hold it next to him, right? So I think he'll be missed massively. I've done this myself. I'm not a manager now, but I sort of help a manager. And when the manager's not there, he is missed. He's the flagship. He's the totem pole of the team. The players have habits. They expect certain things done at certain times, and the manager leads those conversations. Now, he may be able to still do that remotely.
Do you intentionally manage worse than him just so you don't show him up and the players will want him back?
No, you basically, there are things you can do remotely, obviously, and there are things you can do with big tactical cameras so you can see the game remotely and wherever he is, by the way, to watch the game. So there are ways to get information across, but I think from a purely presence thing, he'll be missed. If it's one game, it could be seen as something as a motivational thing to do something for the manager. You know what I mean? But it's only going to be one game given the COVID restrictions right now. So I'm hopeful that we get away with it. But I must say, this is one game where I think he'll be missed because Manchester City are quite intricate and you need to know what they're doing very quickly and react to it. And I think this is Arteta's strength and we're going to miss him.
I don't want to harp on this game too much because I think it is sort of one of those things where you go out, you do your best, and you just see what happens. Paul, we should be, though, in a different situation than we were with Manchester City away, where we had both no players and went down to 10 men. Not the best Granit Xhaka day, maybe. But I guess my question for you is sort of how you're going to set your expectations this. I think people are really sick of being told that games are free hits. And I don't like the idea that they're free hits. I think I saw Rianawal on Twitter say it, and I liked this better. It's not the game we're going to measure our season by. You want to do your best. You don't want to get battered. It's not a free hit, but it is not the game ultimately that will come to define how we think about how the team is playing in the season. We come into it in a weird position because we've had, I don't want to say easy games. We've made them easy, but easier opposition. And we've been playing very front-footed, pressing in a lot of advanced territory. It's unlikely to be that way against City. So I'm curious how you think we might set up, if we set up differently at all, and what you think the impact will be of having to play probably a lot more on the transition and without the ball than we have been recently.
I think we'll set up, in a sense, exactly the same way we've been setting up recently, but what you won't see is Xhaka drifting forward. He won't become an attacking 8 when we're in possession in their third, because we won't be in their third as much. You're going to see basically a two-man pivot in midfield because they're going to be in possession and we're going to be sitting back or battling in midfield on our way backwards. The last time we played them, we pressed high up at the start of the game and we blew it with 2 stupid goals that weren't really related to the pressing. And so now we're going to be at home and Arteta's talking about the connection between the team and the fans. I like the way he talks about that connection these days. He doesn't talk about the fans G'ing up the team. He talks about the team G'ing up the fans, playing in ways that get the supporters behind them, which I absolutely love. And he's been very consistent on that. It's not like a manager who's just in trying to get the crowd to cheer for him and save his ass. All the way through, he talks extremely clearly, woven into his thinking, that playing in ways that get the supporters behind you is the way to play. So I think we're going to press. I think we're going to try and do as much as we can of what we did against those teams recently, maybe with a tweak or two, because we're playing against a team who knows how to play around a press. And he did something very different the last time against City at the Etihad. He had a significantly different pressing scheme where he had the 2 guys who push up. It was probably Aubameyang and Saka. He had them quite wide apart. He was basically saying, have a go getting it to your full backs and we'll have a go getting it off to them. So he kind of exposed the middle a little bit. And he had 3 centre-backs who could push up into midfield to help out. And I'm not saying it worked great, we'll never really know if it was going to work. It was risky. It was different. But it was a pressing scheme and it was different. And I think we'll press them as much as we can at home at the Emirates. And that'll see Granit Xhaka pushing up, because we've always used him as the next line of pressing. It's not a new thing that, oh, look, Granit Xhaka's up in the attacking third pressing them. In fact, again, against City, do you remember that moment? You saw Granit Xhaka chasing down their left back across to the goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. He rushes Ederson, who fluffs it. We get it back, and actually Xhaka has a shot on goal when we do the recovery. Only he's slightly offside. So don't be surprised to see us pushing up and seeing something of the Norwich setup, but not very often. Basically, we're going to end up getting pushed back at some stage. I think we're going to go for it the best we can.
I mean, I think that's right, Clive. I think the interesting thing here is looking at the fixtures that come up next and looking at when we're going to lose players. I think this will be our last game with Party and with Pepe eligible. The irony, I mean, it would probably be a pretty good spot to start Nicola Pepe if you sort of think, again, I hate to say free hit, but like, we've got him. Let's put the minutes into his legs, so it's our one chance to kind of rest the guys we know we can't rest unless we I think we'll rotate for the FA Cup. I don't know about the League Cup, but do you have anything to add on how we'll approach this game? I don't think we need to put a lot into it because we know what the challenge is. We know what the bar is for what we have to try to achieve. What do you think the approach looks like?
Yeah, so we're developing into something now, aren't we? That we can all see. We have the four guys in the centre of the pitch, and we have two sprinters on the outside in Martinelli and Saka. So those four guys rotate around depending on the state of the game. Sometimes a double pivot, sometimes in a 4-2, and sometimes the 4-2-3-1. Doesn't really matter where the ball is. You go and press it. You're never in your system for more than 2 minutes at a time. Depends what's happening in the game. So I do like the fact that we're controlling the central areas and we have an exit into wide areas. I quite like that. If you're playing Man City, who do have two centre backs at the back normally, although I noticed last night they played Nathan Ake as left fullback and they had a 3. I don't think he'll play in this game. I don't know if you noticed Man City kept all their subs on the bench, didn't use anybody. So I expect changes there. Maybe Zinchenko comes in, or Kyle Walker comes back. I've just seen his fit, which is a shame because our trick could actually be getting into those wide spaces. And if we are playing against Cancelo, who's a very good player, but he can be caught pace-wise, Kyle Walker can't be caught pace-wise, right? So there's just no human being faster than him, right? So, but he has been out for quite a while, so that'd be interesting to see what they do. If they play Nathan Ake against Saka, that's going to be manslaughter. So we don't, if they do that, well, good luck, because I think we'll get the ball into that area. So that's what I would do. I would try to control the centre as much as we can, keep our distances nice and tight, and we spring into wide areas, and then we underlap there from that space onwards. I'm a bit worried about Tomiyasu, not seen the picture of him yet. The training video has just come out, so let's see if he's in that. If he's not in that, we are now relying on Rob Holding to be agile in that slot in the half space, which we know that Man City are fantastic at drilling into half spaces. So that worries me. It does worry me, but it is what it is. I've learned not to get too excited about these games anymore because I always get excited about them and think we're going to win them, and then the first 5 minutes happens. You think, oh my God, we are far away. But I've watched a number of games recently, again, with City, Chelsea, Man United, and they're competitive football matches in the main, apart from maybe City on occasion. There's no reason why we can't be competitive. Just be competitive. If other teams like Brentford can go out there and be competitive, well, so can we. Particularly at home. And there is a different vibe in that stadium at home. There's no Wolves game. I wish that was 5 o'clock. If it's 5 o'clock, my goodness, that would be going mad, right? So it's a different vibe in that stadium, and I think that could really lift us to a different place. So that's what I'm hoping for as one of my intangibles, shall we say.
Yeah, Paul, quickly, final word on the idea of this being a free hit, by the way. Like, I hate the expression because I think it just ruffles people's feathers in terms of like our stature in the game. I think it is intended to mean that this is a game where theoretically, if you don't get all 3 points, you don't get the same kind of punishment for it in terms of the reaction. It's hard to articulate. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, it's not a free hit. You go for it. It's a measuring stick, but after it, you blow it off, right? If you don't get the result, if they kind of break us halfway through and our scheme kind of falls apart and we're just a bunch of guys defending, like, you don't say, oh, well, this team did better against City and that team did better against City than we did. We must not be very good. Well, like, you lose, you move on. Maybe a long time before we're actually good enough against Manchester City. Being good enough against almost everybody else is plenty good enough. You just blow it off. And that's not just the player, the manager, that's the supporters. It won't be the pundits, it won't be the media. But we've got to just say, oops, and on we go. Day after, we'll talk about it, we'll assess it, we'll analyze it. Then you blow it off and you go again. That's basically it.
Yeah. So, let's talk about the state of evaluating results and point totals in the context of what's happening with the league generally then. Because, Paul, what we're seeing, I hate to say parity, because there is not parity in the Premier League, and there's not parity of spending. But the gap is closing. You don't have as many buffoonish, ridiculous managers in the league as you once did. And we are seeing scenarios where teams can be pegged back. Teams can drop points really in any situation. I mean, I thought Leicester were sort of lucky to hold on for the points against Liverpool, but they did it. We saw Brighton hold Chelsea with a late Danny Welbeck winner. That guy, get in. But I actually thought that it was well-deserved, and actually it could have been more than 1 point for Brighton, given the way that game went. We saw Newcastle get a point that could have been 3 points, really probably should have been 3 points against Manchester United. So, I am sort of inclined to think, Southampton, by the way, beating West Ham away, I'm inclined to think that we are going to struggle psychologically as fans, and we've seen some of this last season. You look at how we've done over the calendar year, we're a point off Liverpool. It's a good haul. I think it's saying, like 72 points, 71 points, something like that. But you drop dumb points. And I'm starting to think that the problem we're going to have is every team is going to drop dumb points, minus maybe, City and to some extent Chelsea and Liverpool, although 5 draws and 2 losses for Liverpool, 6 draws and 2 losses for Chelsea. How do you look at the way we evaluate what we should be doing, not in terms of table position, but point acquisition in games we play in? Is it purely just seeing the style of football and the performances you want? Because I don't think there's any team, certainly outside those top 3, but even maybe including a few of them, that's just going to get on these kinds of runs where smaller teams aren't pegging you back, aren't getting points off you.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into the why you don't burn a huge amount of emotional energy on the City result, City afterwards. It's just a discipline. You say, fuck it, that's not what decides our season. Mm-hmm. It's beating the lower and middle level teams and being competitive against the people in around you and just above you. And the only thing I'd say right now is I think we might be in a little bit of a false bubble in that this COVID and December game for everybody, including European games for some teams, is kind of the great leveler. So suddenly teams like Liverpool and Chelsea, West Ham are going south. Tottenham, who should be on the rise because they're nice and rested, are like, they're a bit screwed up because they may be rested, but they haven't played. I just think it might be a little bit of a false dawn in terms of the leveling of it out. I think you might go back to seeing more of a tiered structure within the league once everybody comes back from this January break and the cup games are behind them. But from our perspective, what we got to do is what we got to do. Match those in and around us and below us. Be very consistent. Have a way of playing football, and if we start to crank it, and what's impressed me in particular about Arsenal is, he says, jinxing everything. We've been really, really good at fitness. Especially for Arsenal. I mean, we used to be like the worst. Then we got to being bang average in terms of keeping players fit. And we're the team who wants to play all December and doesn't want any COVID allowances for anybody because we're ready to go. A guy here, a guy there. I don't know if we've just got super lucky, but we must have done something pretty good as well.
Well, we don't have Europe. I mean, worth a mention.
Yeah. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
We've is there a team apart from maybe City, and they have their troubles, who's in better shape in terms of player availability, squads, fitness, consistency? We've had some COVID, but we might actually be reasonably good at managing our COVID protocols. We've done a really good job. And if we can keep that going for the rest, I used to say like a year or so ago, just leave our players alone, God. Just leave us fit to see what we can do. Now, it turned out it didn't solve all our problems, but I think it's a big component going into the second half of this year. If we keep these guys fit, we don't have Europe. We can play very consistent lineups, established playing patterns. We don't like losing Tomiyasu. Ben White did a good job, but he plays differently to Tomiyasu. He has to learn the scheme there. We want as little of that as possible and as much of playing our team, our football, our way against the teams around us and below us for the rest of this season. And yeah, we might actually crank our way into the top 4.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I do agree that like one of the challenges we're facing right now is just the fact that like, because teams are on so many, there's such a disparity in the number of games played, some on 17, some on 18, some on 19, some on 20, that it is a little hard to figure out where teams should be in the table. But for me, that's why I think the thing that I really like, honestly, is the idea of whether I can connect to the football we're playing and like the football we're playing, because I think if I believe the process is good, I trust that eventually the outcome will follow. And I think I've tried to be clear recently that I love watching the football we're playing. And I get that some of that is because of the teams we've faced. But even against West Ham, I think we saw it very clearly. And, they're not too shabby. I mean, I realize they're on a bit of a poor run right now.
The other thing we're seeing is good football for 90 minutes, not for 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, the Everton game, that first half was really dispiriting. And it wasn't dispiriting because of the result. It was because it was very tame, sort of uninspiring, dull football. But that has gone. And I think we look like a team that can play football that I can, and again, I'm just speaking for me, that I can connect with, that I can enjoy watching, that I think makes the best out of the best players we have. And that is exciting.
We're getting the toothpaste up the tube. And to your point of, it's very hard to know where we're at. But that's like, I said it once, I didn't realize, like, for me, it just works for where we're at. And like the last 4 or 5 games, the toothpaste is right up the tube. We're in the final third. We're playing our football there. That has not been really the case in Arteta's tenure or in Emery's tenure, where we're playing our football where Arsenal ought to be playing, and we're finally getting there. To your point on it's hard to know where you're at because different teams, different number of games, blah, blah, blah. They'll have a backlog. They'll have to catch up the other team. So that's the upside of it. But that's why I was interested in the points per game. If we can keep this clip, we can only control what we can control. If we can keep it around this 2 points per game for the rest of the season, we don't need to keep staring at, they're 1 game behind, 1 game up, because that'll move around. We'll care in April and May. But for now, if we can keep it at a clip of 2 points per game, we're in good shape.
Yeah, I agree. Let's shift. Clive, you want to just weigh in on that? And then I want to shift gears to how we handle January with some absences and maybe some new arrivals.
Yeah, when I hear you guys talk about this stuff, I feel myself duty bound to explain why it's happened, right? So why are we playing? You
are duty bound to do that. In fact, that's why you're on the podcast. I recommend you do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about what Arteta's invested in this year, he's invested in defenders, isn't he? Through his reign, he's invested in defenders, and you come from the Pep school where the most important player in your team is your goalkeeper, right? So just the addition of Ben White, the reintroduction of Gabriel, introduction of Tomiyasu and Ramsdale has completely changed our confidence about where we can stand on the pitch. And everything moves forward. If that moves forward, then everything else steps forward. And then if we're playing in the right areas, on occasion we don't, Everton away, for example, but since then we've fixed it. we have a greater chance to push teams, squeeze distances, and then suddenly people talk about pressing. No shit, we're pressing. What? We're just nearer people. And if you're a footballer, you're naturally competitive and the ball's in your area, you go and get it. Right? So it's all about where you start from. And it's a big thing for me, this. If you watch what Patrick Vieira done at Crystal Palace, first thing he did was change his centre-backs. And suddenly everyone's looking at him differently. Change the centre-backs. Make sure they are agile, quick, can run over their shoulders, are good on the ball. You can progress the ball into the central areas and everything moves forward and stays forward. You put pressure on the ball, the exit pass will be poor and you get it again and you create waves of attack. If you don't put pressure on the ball, you will now dance into their tune.
Yep.
And that's what's happened historically, and now we're sustaining that a little bit longer, so we're a little bit less punk rock. Now, if I was to ask you, and it's probably coming on to the January signing thing, we're a nice team, likeable team. I can remember talking to my friends in the stadium saying the best thing about going to watch Arsenal is the social. Now, the best thing about going to watch Arsenal is watching Arsenal. It's changed. The atmosphere has changed. All around the ground has changed. There's connectivity within that club. Now, what's the next phase? What does that look like? What attributes do we need to add to take us from being a really nice top 5 team in the calendar year on most metrics to we want to be top 2, top 1? What is that going to take? And I think that's the thing I've been thinking about when I've been lying in my bed sick, thinking about that. And I got some ideas. And that's where my head is going to get to that. Elliot.
Yeah, no, we're going to get to that. And I mean, doing the rewatch on the Patreon side for the Norwich game, like the thing that you see so clearly about why pressing matters, and I was saying this to Paul, look, we sometimes talk about teams as they're shit, they're good, these players are shit, these players are good. But like all of these players in the Premier League are actually really good in the sense that if you give them time and if you give them space, they can kill you. They can pick a defense splitting pass. That's how they got to this level. Like, I mean, I'll use Xhaka as a great example. I watched Xhaka for Switzerland in the international game, and he's an absolute stone cold killer. And in some of these games, he's been a stone cold killer because he's had a little time and a little space. And my goodness, can he pick a pass? We've seen that not necessarily be the case with him when the time and space isn't there. And so I think it is important to add a press, not just because, good teams press, but because when you don't put pressure on the ball, you start to level the playing field a bit because you're letting mediocre players feel comfortable. And as Clive said, sort of dance to the beat they want. We're dancing to their beat. So you don't want that to happen. Let's shift gears and look towards January, because I do think we have a unique challenge in January given potential outgoings, AFCON absences, the fixture congestion, and what that means for maybe what we'll do with the transfer window as well. But again, whenever we talk about the addition of new talent and the need for new talent, I feel compelled to tell you that there is one fantastic way to add new talent to your roster, and that's with Indeed. Indeed is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want, a short list of quality candidates as fast as possible, because you can do it all. Attract, interview, and hire all at Indeed. And if you're Mikel Arteta, coach the team through AirPods in another guy's ears. Don't struggle on your own to find quality candidates. Indeed can help you hire the right people right now. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process, so you can find talent with the skills you need through tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Beat some YouTube comp with terrible music in the background. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description, and you can even invite them to apply right away. So if your job description is striker, who can do a little bit of what Lacazette does and a little bit of what Aubameyang does, they'll find you that. They're great. With Indeed Instant Match, over 90% of employers get quality candidates as soon as they sponsor their job post, according to Indeed data. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than those who only see it in search, according to Indeed data. Who needs key attraction? Get started right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/vision. $75 credit at Indeed.com/vision. That's Indeed.com/vision. Offer is valid. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Clive, is that enough of that?
Enough.
Well, let's get on to how we hire, Clive. We could be losing Ainsley Maitland-Niles. We will be losing Thomas Partey to the African Cup of Nations. We will be losing Mohamed El Neni to the African Cup of Nations. We did sell Joe Willock to Newcastle, which I think looks like pretty savvy business at the moment. We do not have a whole hell of a lot of central midfielders. Granit Xhaka and look to Albert Sambi Lakanga. That's sort of it, maybe, unless you think Charlie Patino is going to come in and suddenly be Wunderkind superstar. So let's start with the midfield. How big an issue is it? How important is it that we maybe don't let Maitland-Niles go, depending on what the offer looks like? And how do we solve it?
Yeah, well, Jose Mourinho will no doubt want him on, this first possible day you can get him, because he's, a big supporter of Arsenal, as we know. I think for Ainsley's career, he needs to go and play. So he looks as though, from a distance, that he's switched off, and so he needs to go and play. So good luck. So we need to go and do something there for me, and we may as well bring forward a buy maybe that we was going to do in the summer. Might as well see if we can bring it forward now. And into something that we can still fits our model. And there are a couple of options out there. I think one thing I'm thinking about when it comes to looking for midfielders and even particularly midfielders, I think because we're playing a lot more positional play, I think it's important we have multi-dimensional players that are happy squeeze into the touchline, but also can play on the inside. I think that's really key. If you look at the Man City players, they're very comfortable in all the zones of the pitch. I think we have a lot of that, but we can still add a bit more. So when you're looking for the attributes of a centre midfielder, I've moved away from the Yves Bissouma type to stand still and just make me feel comfortable that somebody's there going to win the ball. I think it's important that we have a bit more all-round ability to work up and down, but also travel with the ball and pass the ball. But most importantly is get away from pressure. And then when you get away from pressure, be able to threaten the opposition. I think that's the key thing. The way we're playing we are sort of playing a single pivot, but we're sort of rolling around into a two at times as well. So I think that player needs to have the ability to do many jobs next to Thomas Partey, for example, or Sambi Lokonga, who I think is a Thomas Partey takeout, shall we say, in the future. And I think having that ability to just move and travel, but threaten with energy and keep the energy high, Leicester City style, I think that's where we're going as a club. So that's what's in my head when it comes to midfield targets.
Yeah. Paul, thoughts on that? I mean, I don't think you ever want to be in the short-termist position of saying, hey, we've got a bit of a need for this month, so let's make a deal we wouldn't otherwise make. We've seen loan deals where we've tried to solve positional shortfalls be really, really bad in some instances. Kim Kallstrom obviously comes to mind. Dennis Suarez comes to mind, if that's even his name. I'm just going to say, I think that's his name. But at the same point, I do think if you have people on your radar, and I would think midfielders are certainly on our radar, if they were planned to be summer moves, pulling them forward or trying to loan them to buy them in the summer can work. We certainly saw that happen with Odegaard. So do you have a specific thought, maybe not name-wise, but just in terms of how we cope with this period and the right way to do that, what we might be looking at?
I think it's going to be really tough to get a player to make a difference in January that we don't really need in February. Like by the time you get him in, settled, blah, 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 they're still working out which way's up. And like, are they helping or hurting if you drop them into your lineup? I think we're going to try, unless there's the perfect guy ready to go that we're getting early from the summer and he's available early on. And like a Martin Odegaard, super smart, came in, could contribute from the get-go. That's not everybody who comes in. We've seen players who have fitness issues, who they just, where do they get their dry cleaning done in London, and it's still the middle of January, right? There's that whole adaptation to where you are, who the players are. The number of players who can come in time, be fully match fit. So if they're fully match fit, they're playing for somebody somewhere most games, so they're kind of useful, so they won't really want to sell them. I just don't think it lines up for us, given, it's not February or March we're trying to fix, it's January. It's quite interesting in midfield, though, because we'll have Sambi and Xhaka, and that's basically it. And Party has been playing the midfield hub, so Sambi being the right footer. Maybe we go back to 2 in the middle for 90 minutes in every game with those 2 guys. But it would be a bit of an adaptation of how we play as well, because when Sambi has played with Party, he's playing on the left, typically. And so we're going to swap those 2 around. We'll only have the 2 of them. I think we'll try and make it work with other players like Smith Rowe, like Martin Odegaard maybe acting as a more of the third midfielder, a little less of the 10s. Solutions like that. Ben White is always mooted as he's played midfielder for Leeds. He hasn't really. They just put him on the team sheet in that spot. Like, one of the games was against Huddersfield, interestingly enough, when his job was actually to man mark Emile Smith Rowe for 90 minutes rather than do the Calvin Phillips job. He hasn't really played that midfielder role from what I could see. I went back and checked out those games the best I could. I don't think he's really played a couple of games as a CM, even though if we can see that in his game. Like, we basically have 2 dudes, maybe Charlie Patino for a few minutes, and certainly cup games to kind of share the minutes. And that's it. And I think that's how we'll do it. We'll try and fudge our way there and hope not to get hurt.
Yeah. I think the other thing that maybe plays in our favor a little bit, I hate to say this favor, it's a clumsy wording, but go with me on this, is that a lot of other clubs are going to be uniquely challenged during this period because of AFCON, because of COVID and injuries themselves. So it's not a situation where, I can think back to certain times under Arsene Wenger where you'd be frustrated because you'd be like, we're a fullback away from competing for a title, or, if we just brought in a center back, it was fixed, or the year we lost the title to Leicester, we probably were a midfielder away. But in this situation, it's not just Arsenal being short at a position and other clubs being able to catch us up because of that. I think there are a lot of clubs that are going to find themselves struggling. So, Clive, as a final thought on this before we maybe look back on the year a little bit, are there any other priorities you see for January? I mean, I think we know the summer midfielder striker, like that would probably be the thing that people would say, let's go get something done there. But for right now, I am inclined to say that, we have three games in January in the 2 League Cup ties and the FA Cup tie, that if you had to throw them away, and by throw them away, I just mean play a week inside, use academy players. I think as long as we are really genuinely fighting to be back in the Champions League, I don't know that too many people are going to be outraged by that. And I can guarantee you Liverpool are going to play, or I would assume, an extremely weakened, quote unquote, side against us in the League Cup. They won't even have a choice, and Salah and Mane won't even be available. So I think you could get through it. I think you could manage your way through it and not do anything. But, your final thoughts on how we get through that period?
Yeah, the good thing is Chelsea and Spurs have got similar amount of games with the Carabao Cup game for them as well. So if you look at our run of fixtures, right, so you've got City, I'd go strong. Liverpool at home, I'd go strong. I'd rotate for Forest away, and I'd rotate for Liverpool away. But also in that competition, you have 5 subs, so you have your subs on the bench. Then I'd go strong for Spurs, obviously, and then strong for Burnley. So there's a period to manage there. We do have good shadow players, but some of those players are starting to feel a little bit on the edge. It's going to be interesting to see if they're talking to their agents or not. And Maitland-Niles is the first one. And I wouldn't, I'd want Arsenal to keep him for as long as possible. Why not, right, to get through this period? But we'll see what happens, and we'll see how motivated he is. But there's a period to play. There's 2 or 3 games for him to play. And you never know, the deal he's not on the table right now. There could be a better one around the corner. So that's what I would try to do to get through this period. But the good thing is we're not the only ones going through it. The people that we're really competing against have got difficulties themselves. Lots of games to backfill, for example. Spurs have had a number of games cancelled, but they were away games. Their first away game they played the other day, they didn't make it, right? Didn't get over the line, even against 10 men against Southampton. So challenges for all of us. We're in not a bad place, Elliot, but let's see. It's a different time with COVID being around, etc.
I mean, if you look at it, after January 1st, we don't play another game that I regard as mattering that much until January 16th. Like, we're in a position to sort of give the team a winter break. And I realize that, I mean, first of all, Nottingham Forest away, like, you don't want to lose the FA Cup. I get it. But, you should be able to heavily, heavily rotate for that. And I am just speaking for me now. I know some people will not like this. I just cannot be arsed, as you might say, about the League Cup. Like, I don't think anybody is going to celebrate lifting the League Cup.
We might need to stop Spurs winning a trophy is my only thing about the League Cup.
I mean, look, I hear you. They'll find a way not to win the trophy. Don't worry. Don't you worry about that. If they get Liverpool in the final, I think we've seen Liverpool do the job for us in a much bigger cup under those circumstances. But like, I guess what I'm saying is, if we took that super seriously and 3 days before Tottenham away, we ran ourselves to exhaustion under Liverpool's press at Anfield so that we could get to the League Cup final, and it doesn't go well at Spurs away in the league, no one's going to be feeling very good. So I would be managing this to be in tip-top shape on January 16th, because there's only one more game. Like, the funny thing is, everyone's like, oh, fixture congestion. We play 3 games that matter in January. The City game and the Spurs game are separated by 15 days. And then we have a week to Burnley. And after that, it's February 10th, cup fixtures aside, to Wolves away. So it's actually a very spread out and manageable period if we just don't overdo it in the cups. And that would be, that'd be my inclination. And I think by then you could be looking at a situation where you go into the Wolves game with your African Cup of Nations players back. So it's 2 games. It's Spurs away and it's Burnley at home. That's it, other than the cup ties. I think if you look at it through that lens, it sort of changes the way we think about this period. And I think we have to look at it through that lens as we sit right now with a legitimate shot at top 4. Hell, even Chelsea, they're having a wobble. Manchester United, not exactly tearing it up. And I realize as we speak, they're going to be playing very soon. But, a game where, let's face it, we're expecting them to win that one if they can win anything. So we'll see how it goes. Let's just quickly look back on the year that was, though, as we get ready to say goodbye to it. I want to start this segment by saying thank you to everyone who shared this year with us. I think it was another challenging year globally, but a year where I got to meet a lot of people in person, sadly not in Vegas, but happily in London. I got to meet people who work at the club who are amazing. We got to help the Arsenal Foundation, and we will do so again. We got to do our live event. We got to share a lot of episodes and a lot of conversations with a lot of wonderful people. So I want to say thanks to that. I got to meet Clive for the first time ever, and Tim for the first time ever, James McNicholas for the first time ever. So, some amazing memories with a lot of people. Still haven't met Paul. So again, just a really good year all around. Or Scott, but I will actually be meeting Scott in January. So a lot of good stuff, and obviously winning the FCA award for the podcast thing, which was incredible. But I think for Arsenal, it was a sneaky, great year in some ways. A year where we went into it with Arteta on the rise. It continues to be on the rise. Maybe 2 bumps in the road in terms of the Europa League exit and those first 3 games this season, which I was always perfectly willing to throw out, even if the emotion of that moment was hard. So, Clive, I'll start with you. Let's just talk about your just 30,000-foot view, your enduring Arsenal memories from 2021, maybe a player you fell in love with or a thing you learned, or what is it about Arsenal in 2021 that you will take with you into 2022?
Well, the number one thing for me is going back to the stadium and then being filled up again and how people are feeling. Honestly, you was there for one of them. That was a good one. There's been better ones. Villa and West Ham and Spurs, just like incredible. And I don't think you can put a price on that. And I think getting people together again in a pandemic period and just being able to be normal around the stadium and in the ground it meant more to me than I actually realised. And that crystallised particularly around our live event, Elliot. As you know, those evenings were incredible, right? So I'm never going to forget those moments. On the pitch, I think the reintroduction of players that we like has transformed it for people. And I suppose if you wanted to pick one player, which I think was the original question that I normally ignore, I will say...
This one was open-ended. It's whatever you want.
I'm really pleased for the impact of what Aaron Ramsdale has done. Right? I think not just. I think Aaron Ramsdale primarily. I think Saka and Smith Rowe we know about, but Ramsdale, I don't think anyone could see the impact he was going to have. There was, I could see he was not a bad goalkeeper, but he's not. He's a very good goalkeeper, and he's not a bad bloke. And I think being a good bloke is something that we need to think about a lot more when we're buying our players. People that contribute and give of themselves. It's no longer good enough to bowl into Arsenal, earn a load of money, and walk out about him doing an interview over 3-4 years. It's no longer good enough. You're in an elite environment. You've got to give of yourself, and these players are prepared to do that, and I love it. I absolutely love it, and I think it's changing our experience of watching Arsenal because of the people we have within the club, and I think that's made it a little bit less manager-centric, which I love. I just like to look at the football and not every game be a referendum on somebody's ability. I don't like that, right? So I'm really enjoying it, mate. Really enjoying it.
Well said. Really well said. By the way, if you want to look back on our predictions, which we'll always revisit towards the end of the season, at arsenalvisionpodcast.com under stuff, you'll be able to find our 2021 predictions and see the spreadsheet. I think some are interesting, some are bad, some are actually quite good. The downside is we did them before the final transfers were made, so a bit of a miss there. Paul, what's your enduring Arsenal takeaways from 2021?
Obviously, it's going to be leaning towards the latter parts of 2021, recency bias and what's important going forward. But the injection of hope, I always felt, and I felt this for Emery too, but with Arteta, a lot of my continued support for him and enthusiasm for him would rest on how he develops our younger players. And then we go and buy 6 of them and bring them in. I guess Odegaard was kind of here before. So on top of like a big measuring stick for me was, and we maybe take it as a slam dunk now, that Saka would keep progressing, Smith Rowe would come on, that Martinelli would become the player we hoped he might have been, that we all believed he was when he joined us, but like it was almost all potential and a couple of quick, great performances and quick, great goals for Martinelli. How many, like that's the Adnan Januzaj thing. Oh, look, he's a worldie. He's played a couple of games, scored a couple of screamers, disappears from view. I think he's over at Real Sociedad, used to play with Martin Odegaard. And that isn't what has happened. Nobody's slid backwards, really. I'm glad we're talking now, not a month ago, because Martinelli is well in the mix, to the point where we're not quite sure how you get him out of the team right now, if you ever get him out of the team, and everything starts to make sense. And then you add the 5-6 players we brought in, Ramsdale, Tomiyasu, and like you just see hope and potential, but potential that's being realized right now, not crossing your fingers that this might be something in the future. And I think in terms, like to Clive's point about the crowds back, I'm going to go back to a topic that got me into some trouble at the start of the season, the Brentford game, where I said, like we were all in pain and we just lost and everything looked shit. And yet, like I had my headphones on, I wasn't in any stadium anywhere, and I had it turned up loud. And the fact that the football was alive again with people in the stadium, that it mattered, that it, like never take me back to empty stadiums again. And I know we hated it, and I know Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher were dancing with the crowd at Brentford, and that was our enemy of the day. But Brentford were just up from the Championship. Football was alive. Those supporters were going fucking nuts. And some days we'll cry and some days we'll be wounded, but at least you fucking care, right? You're alive. Football was alive. It wasn't this anesthetized, antiseptic football in the stadium, which was an interesting laboratory experiment for a month, but not for a year. And like that moment pain, maybe because of the painfulness of the game, it was just fucking alive, and football was back, and stadiums were pounding, and it mattered to people, and people understood why this was the most important game and sport, and why it was beyond sport for people. Like, this is a big chunk of people's lives. It's not just a game. And you can say, should we care about this shit? Well, what else is there to care about at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm.
So that Brentford game is kind of because it was painful, but because it was just pumping. We really fucking cared that we lost that game, and it was a thing.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from 2021, to follow on from what you said, is that it's just football, and it doesn't really matter that much. No, I think everything you said is well said. I mean, for me, one of the takeaways I think is Bukayo Saka, and that's because it's not just the Arsenal part of it; it's what happened with England and what happened to him as a person and how he's rallied from that. And to have a player so young and so talented go through so much so early and come out the other side of it better than ever and still so likable and not grizzled and miserable from the experience, but even arguably more likable. I just thought that was an incredible thing for him, an incredible thing for us. I think the thing I'll take away is the relationships. The relationships, I think, are different now because, we had so many players in 2020, whether it was Willian, whether it was, I don't care who you want to say it was, the Pablo Maries or the Cedrics or the Holdings. And I realize Rob Holding's a nice guy, like him, so maybe that's a bad example. I'm sort of struggling to find exactly what I mean here. But when you look at Smith Rowe and Odegaard and Saka and Martinelli and Lokonga and Tomiyasu and Ramsdale and Benjamin White and Gabriel and like Tierney, Tavares, like it's a reimagining of Arsenal in a, to Clive's point about good attitudes, but just it feels fresher, it feels lighter, it feels like everybody kind of wants to rally around them. I learned a little bit of a lesson, I think, in humility too, just about like, look, I love to say what I think because what else can I say? And if I'm wrong, I like to believe I hold my hand up and say I'm wrong. And, similarly, there are times I'm right, and I don't like to think that I'm someone who gloats over the times I'm right. I say what I say, and I go from there. But maybe there were some things over the summer where some of the past negativity had crept into my analysis, and so that's always important to flush out. I think I feel reconnected to Arsenal. Fans in the ground helps. Getting back to the Emirates Stadium and over to London certainly helped, and I feel blessed to have done that. I think the football has started to recapture my imagination. And so I have to agree with Paul that the combination of the football we were playing, the players we had, and the absence of fans had really, I think, hit a nadir. Now it feels back to the urgency, the relevance, the excitement, the fun of it. There were certainly good performances. There were certainly disappointing ones. But I look forward to watching Martinelli and Odegaard and Smith Rowe and Saka play. I look forward to watching Tomiyasu and Ramsdale and Benjamin White, Tavares, Tierney, Gabriel. I look forward to those guys.
What else I'd add quickly is that it feels aligned finally up and down the club. Mertesaker's just done an interview, which I haven't fully read, talking about how, going after expensive, experienced older players was a throw of the dice that we fell flat on our face for. And now we've changed direction. It's clear that Josh Kroenke is fully involved in that. I'm not trying to give the Kroenkes any credit here, but I much prefer the idea that everybody up and down the organization is on the same page, from youth development through the academy, through Mertesacker, et cetera, Edu, Josh Kroenke, all get it. Are all on the same page, and everything makes sense at the moment in terms of our recruitment, our direction, the players on the field, what we ought to be doing, what we are doing. Young and promising manager who's learning. We're a learning machine at the moment is the thing I have always wanted to see, and I feel is the case. We're making lots of mistakes, but we're getting smarter and smarter.
Yeah, the smarter thing too, because for me, like, you know what I didn't like? I didn't like looking at Arsenal being like, wow, we're the dumb club. We're the poorly run club. We're the club that doesn't have a prayer. And, you know, what are we trying to do? We're trying to buy a parachute by going into this Super League. I don't feel that way anymore, and that's nice. So I don't want to overdo it. There's plenty of time for retrospectives. We literally play in a couple of days, but it will be 2022. So on behalf of all of us, for Scott and Tim and Clive and Paul, I wish you a very, very happy new year. I wish you a healthy and prosperous new year. I wish you a new year where maybe we find our way out of the pandemic, find our way out of the mid-table, and find our way back into the top table of life and of football, into the Champions League and beyond. I mean, maybe the title's still on. Who knows? We'll see what happens against City on New Year's Day. But it is an absolute pleasure to share these memories with you. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at CliveBAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name is Elliot Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Just as a content update, we will have an instant reaction pod on New Year's Day, bright and early in America, but normal time in other places, or super, super early or super overnight, depending on where you are. You get the idea. That'll be right after Manchester City. And then regular service resumes Monday, January 3rd, with the post-match podcast to break down how we, the mighty Arsenal, love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Manchester City 0.